Okay, good afternoon everybody. Oh, I'm quite loud, I can hear myself really well. Over there it was a bit of a challenge, but if I'm shouting at you, I'll apologise now. I'll get my balance in a minute. So yeah, welcome. Looks like I've got a good turnout. Hopefully everybody will still be here at the end. That's going to be my measure as to whether or not everybody enjoyed the content, so please. And it also proves to me that putting the word addictive into a presentation title seems to bring people in, so that's always a good mark as well. Who am I? Why am I here? So Rob Manning, 25 years, I've been working in digital and CRM across 8 countries, I've worked agency side, blah, blah, blah. None of you really care any of that. It's really about these things. This is me. I live in the country, I work in the city. I spend an awful lot of time staring out of a train window. And it's really these questions which actually kind of, get into my mind. Why are we loyal to some brands but not others? What is it that drives us to feel that connection? And how do these brands make us feel? And I think there's been some really interesting conversations today and in and around some of the discussions. There's a big focus in terms of AI, and a lot of it is around this human connection, and how do we start to go through there? But before I sort of get started and kind of keep talking, it'd be great just to get a bit of audience participation. I know everybody likes that. But just as a hands up, for those of you who are in kind of any type of retention, how many people here are currently happy with their customer retention rate? 1, 2? Do you think you have loyal customers? No? Quite a few more, that's always good. And who is still using SMS or email as their primary channel for retention marketing? And I mean, you're not alone, right? Most people are still putting their part up. It's still a huge part. I mean, this is some Invested research, but we can see that mobile messaging, 58% of marketers are using that for customer retention. Email, 52%. And some of these areas, I mean, this one surprises me the most in terms of mobile web and website, because I've got no idea where the people who use email are actually sending their customers to, but they're not obviously starting to use it. Social media marketing kind of sitting somewhere in the middle at around about 28%. And there's a good reason why email in particular is still a really strong channel. I mean, if we look at this in terms of our conversion rates that we can see, it's way up there in terms of an average of 4.29% versus social media down the other end of that scale at around about 1.8. We know that email works. We can only go around today. There are a lot of providers, a lot of technology platforms where it's looking at how we can actually start to build and develop and push onto email. And I'm not here to slate email, so don't get that wrong, and I'm not here to bash on any of it. I still use email an awful lot myself. But when we look in terms of the performance of it, and I've taken this data from the vitamin supplements, I mean, I'm working gut health, so it was something similar in terms of where to start to benchmark us. And I'm sure within your industries you've got kind of similar marks, but open rates are falling, averaging 27.35%. So, we're not necessarily getting the full attention of our customer databases that we work incredibly hard to actually build up. Consumer acquisition costs going up and up and up, getting more and more difficult, more and more challenging. So, we really need to be maximizing kind of as much as we can within our retention channels in order to give us that ROI, to give us that payback. Now, I love this report as well, this one that comes from We Are Social, and this was with Meltwater, but this is the Global Digital Report. But again, if we now look in terms of where customers are, this chart looks at what types of websites and apps that people are using in the last month. Yes, we've got chat and messaging way up at the top, but the second one on this list is social networks. Between the two of those, you can see we're looking 95-ish, 94, 95%. Versus email, which is down at half of that. Only 40, what is it, where are we looking at? 49, right, we'll call it 50%, right? We'll round it up, 41.5. Of people are actually looking, checking, and using email as an application What do we think are some of the reasons for that? And this is where I want to focus the conversation a little bit today, which is what is shaping and changing our attention? You know, we hear this term of being a distracted consumer, and I'll talk about that a little bit. Part of the challenge is dopamine. I'm not a neuroscientist, but I understand the concept of dopamine. You know, how do we get that hit? This is the cross-section of a brain. Always good for a Wednesday afternoon to look at cross-sections of brains, right? On LSD. Look at how much of this is firing. Clearly a highly addictive substance as it starts to come through. This is the same cross-section of a brain looking at a tailored and personalized video feed on social platform. You can all probably guess which one I'm talking about. Again, look at the different areas that are firing. You know what's coming next? This is what happens when people are reading. We're just not as engaged. Our brain is not firing in as many places. There's not as much going on. That's why we all read before bed, right? That's why they say do not get into doom scrolling, put your phone away. Some of it's to do with blue light, yeah, for sure. But a lot of it's about the way in which it's stimulating your brain. And I'm also not going to talk here about, you know, the effect of social media brain on, you know, kind of current children and teenagers and what that means. We'll leave that for a good few years and see what's to come through. But I do want to pose this question. I talk about this in terms of being addictive loyalty. But what is it that we're actually addicted to? Is it social media? Short form video? An algorithm? Is it the platforms themselves? In my view, they're a delivery mechanic. What they're actually doing is they're giving us access to people. That's what we love to watch. What are other people doing? What are other people saying? What did other people think about this brand, this product, this service, this experience? What are the stories? You know, we are human beings, we are built upon story and storytelling. It's a big part of marketing, whether it's acquisition, you know, kind of or retention. And ultimately, it's experiences. And whether we're experiencing them ourselves or experiencing, you know, kind of through other people's conversations and other people's, you know, kind of content in and around it, for me, that's really what's starting to drive us more and more into these platforms. So how do we then think about this in terms of this principle of addictive loyalty? Now, the first thing I'm going to say is, yes, I've used the word addictive and addicted, but it's not in terms of, you know, from an ethical perspective, trying to get people hooked onto, you know, kind of certain things. It's about actually how do we build genuine, positive, emotional connections with our audience? How do we provide them with information about people, about stories, and about experiences in a format that they want to consume and they want to engage with? So ultimately, building trust and building loyalty and actioning upon that. Oh, I've got a little green dot. Start there. No, I don't really. So, how do we start to then think about creating the right type of content? Content which is going to create an emotional and a human connection. Well, first of all, we can utilize something called the hook canvas. Has anybody here, I mean, many will done, some won't have done, but has anybody here not heard of the hook canvas? Quite a few. I'll very, very quickly explain it then, because I've only got 25 minutes and I could probably spend the entire 25 minutes on this. But the hook canvas ultimately looks at the prospect that everything that we do has some form of trigger. Initially, that trigger will be an external trigger. You see something, someone says something. Something gets into your mind, and I'm going to put this into context in a little while. And from that trigger, there will be some action. We will do something about it. There'll be that first action that's starting to come in. If we can then give people some form of reward, we'll spend more time doing it. The more time we invest, the more reward we get. So we get into this concept of investment and variable rewards. Now, if you start to think about a social media platform and how is this then relevant? Well, the hook canvas is the model that many of the algorithms I'm starting to look at. Did you see that funny TikTok about the dog that did X, Y, and Z? No, I didn't. External trigger. What's your first action? I go on to the TikTok platform, onto the app, I open it up, I view that video of the dog doing something funny and hilarious, I swipe, I see another picture of a dog doing something hilarious or a video, I keep going, I keep going, I keep going, I keep going. The more I swipe, the more happy and elated I become because I'm getting all of this content which is super relevant to me. The more time I invest. The next time I'm bored and I've got 5 minutes to spare, what do? I pick up my phone and I go to TikTok because I think that's what's going to entertain and it's going to engage me for some period of time. And we can ultimately utilize a very similar model, but from a content perspective, maybe not quite as smart in terms of the algorithm, but we're going to put this into context from a gut health perspective. Someone might actually log on, first of all, why am I bloated? They're going to search social media for advice. They're going to watch some videos on gut health, causes, solutions for bloating. They might purchase, hopefully, my meal boosters. That's how I'm going to get purchase number one. Then I'm going to actually hope that product does a good thing and that they feel less bloated and they feel happier into themselves, so they get the reward. The more they take the product, the more they start to feel it. But also, I'm going to be communicating with them around recipes, how to use it, what should this be doing at any one time, to try and keep that level of engagement up, again, delivering through various forms, to the point that then it becomes an internal trigger, i.e., I wonder what else I could do to improve my gut health. What else is out there? And of course, at this point, we have a real challenge because now they're interested in a category or a sector, not necessarily in my products. Gut health is a huge trending, kind of category at the moment, but there are a lot of different products and solutions that are out there, that really could actually start to deliver, some of that reward. And when we start to think about how much content there is, oh, it's not working. 980, I'm rounding up again, 982,000 videos are uploaded to TikTok every hour. Every hour. 30,000 hours of YouTube video is uploaded to YouTube per hour. So, I mean, we could do some mathematics, which is always, a good thing for us. But if we're spending, 60 minutes on TikTok, each of one we're watching for about 15 seconds, you're easily consuming more than 200 videos per hour. The average person now on social media alone watches around about 400 messages or videos per day, 24/7. The platform doesn't stop. They're global. So it creates this. We talked about the distracted consumer. I always talk about constant content and you're in constant contact, but that's ultimately what our digital landscape has become. In retention marketing, we have our trusty funnel. You put people in the top and they make their way down through awareness and consideration and purchase and into repeat. But ultimately, we're going backwards. It's just refreshing your mind. People are being pulled away at every single stage. It's not just us. In these 982,000 TikTok videos per hour and 30,000 YouTube videos, the hours of YouTube footage that is uploaded every single hour, we are being bombarded and we have so many different options that start to come in to it. I stole this, there was a talk the other day and the content manager at Elida talked about the tornado. I was talking about a whirlpool before, but I preferred the tornado and I thought the graphic looked better. But ultimately, this is what we now need to think about when we're thinking about our funnel. Our funnel is no longer a funnel. We need to be thinking about how do we pull people in at every stage of our journey with them. We cannot just rely the fact that just because they came to our website, they bought a product, they opened an email, that they're actually going to repeat, and repeat, and repeat, and repeat. So how do we then become addictive? I talked about some of the key models. So if we want to think about the hook canvas, you want to think about creation of infinity loops in order to drive people through your content. We want to think about that constant content piece. And this is why I'm on this stage today talking about seamless omnichannel, because that's what we have to do, right? We have to pull everything together. It's all got to work in the same direction in order for us to actually make sure that we are capitalizing on every engagement that we've got with our audience. And we have access to way more data than what we've ever had before. Right? These 982,000 hours of TikTok, but we can actually start to understand what are people looking at? What channel are they coming through from? Which pieces of content were engaging with them? What direction does that start to pull? And that gives us this ability to start to understand, okay, well what might have been those triggers? Obviously we need to add this onto, kind of traditional research. I am still 100% an advocate, of both the post-purchase and pre-purchase surveys, exit surveys, kind of regular conversations with your base, pulling your data in from live chat. We really need to pull all of it in, but we can utilize a lot of what we can see happening in these channels in order to guide us over what's capturing people's attention in that moment. That gives us that beginning part to think about, well, okay, so what are these external triggers that we need to be thinking about in order to start building out our infinity loops? How do we then start to then create the right type of content? Now you see on here I've used content and playlists. I'm not yet in the position, maybe going forward in the future with a SME, quite innovative, but I can't build TikTok. But what I can do is I can take my understanding of content and I can take my understanding of triggers, I can build my loops and I can understand that there are some key triggers that I need to build content around. That can be my starting point. I can create multiple playlists where ultimately from my perspective it's people who are interested in improving their general wellness. What even is gut health? That's a big topic. And how do I do anything about it? I can start to think about some specifics around fiber. We won't go into all of the lessons today, but actually 90% of the UK don't get enough fiber in their diet, and only 1 in 3 people know how much fiber they're supposed to have in their diet. That's not a poll. I'm not going to answer that one out. But these are areas which we can start to think about, which are kind of general areas of concern. They're questions we can start to bring in. So it's about then building out that content, building out the playlists, and then utilizing the technology platforms that we've got, building out our automations and our flows. And again, how long is somebody spending? Did they come in on understanding about fiber, but did they then swipe through all of the fiber videos super fast? If so, what am I then starting to do? I'm starting to then think about, okay, well, what is the next playlist that they want to go onto? I'm capturing that information, I'm capturing that data, I'm feeding it back into my other forms of contact, not just from an email perspective, a website perspective, into our live chat and into the chatbots, into our messenger activity. So again, all of it's starting to use the data that I've got to personalize and target based on the behavior and the interests of that individual. I can then start to build out my audiences. What do they start to look like? And again, of course there's levels of segmentation, but when I'm talking about here, I'm talking about what audiences am I then pushing back in to my social, TikTok, Meta, Google, whatever acquisition and ad platforms I'm using to then start to, one, learn a bit more, but secondly, make sure that the consumer that I've talked to, that I might have sent an email to, that I've seen is going down one particular journey, when they come through to the website, they spend a bit of time on it, the next time they go on to TikTok or Meta, that's what starts to come up in their feed from an ad perspective. So utilizing the ad network, not just in terms of acquisition, but also driving through from a retention perspective. Into that, not just that retargeting, but that true kind of remarketing element that's starting to come in. And I can show you just some stats in terms of kind of how well this has started to work. Now, we only launched our D2C store 9 months ago. It launched in January, so everything's super young, and what it does is it means we are building a lot of this sort of technical from the bottom up, so I don't necessarily have the legacy platforms and some of the challenges that others do and I've had in my previous roles. But here are my 3 different emails that started to come through, and I think you can start to see in terms of the results, but looking in terms of, this same subject line, by the way, hence the open rate, same offer, but just proposed in 3 different ways. One, very much about the fact that actually, this is offer-based. Number 2 was much more around, actually, if you're going on holiday, hey, do you know what? You could get gut health, take with you pack, stop you from having gut lag. And secondly, utilizing some of the UGC content that we start to get produced, pushing it into the email platform in terms of an animated GIF, but then encouraging people to click through. And I think you can start to see where we're getting to. Open rates, I'm lucky to have quite an engaged audience, so we'll put that one aside. It was a good subject line. They don't always hit like that. Click rate, 2 and a bit percent, 3%, 32, well 33 if we round it up in terms of the engagement level. But for me, the real kick was from a purchase rate. So I mean, these are all for repeat purchases, but 1.47 off of my plain offer, 3.1 off of here's how you can use our product, and by the way, it's on offer. And a staggering 11.7, I'm going to round that one to 12%. 12% of people who received the user-generated style went through to shoppable feed, so you can actually swipe through it, ended up going through and purchasing. Same products, same segmented audience. A lot of the factors we've started to come through, the only difference in terms of the key message really was the format within which we were delivering it, and therefore how engaged our consumers would actually be. So we've started to now implement this out a little bit further, a little bit wider, across it. So we're now starting to think about each of these key areas, building out our segmentations based on that initial purchase, product, channel, message, building out our flows, building out our playlists across each of our key areas, using dynamic content to pull it in, sending out our emails. When they're coming through then to the website, they're getting a similar experience to what they're used to, that's engaging. They've got a playlist that's going to kick off on their landing page. We're looking at tracks, swipes, view time, clicks. And from that, we're creating everything and then pushing and driving back in terms of coming through. And you can see it just scrolls up through a number of different messages, and we're able to then start to implement and layer different types of message that are coming through. So again, we can start to see, okay, they came in on a fiber journey, but actually, did they then continue on more of a bloating? Did we start to see more interaction and engagement from there? And we can predominantly deliver a sales message, of course, still off of the back of it, because we're here to retain customers, we're here to make repeat revenue as that's going through. So what does this mean then in terms of our stats? Well, I say, early days when we launched out in January, I can look in terms of where we were from a brand perspective previously, but the engagement in terms of our communications has gone up and up and up. The repeat purchase has gone up and up and up. I'm blaming August on the fact that everybody was on holiday. But ultimately, I think from our perspective, what we're seeing is that if we can engage with consumers in a way that they expect, on messages which are resonating, content which is creating that emotional connection, then what we're creating is a very loyal customer base. So these aren't to go out, but they are 3 questions I'll leave you with, from today. But one is, do you understand the emotional triggers, the triggers for an emotional connection with your consumers? Are you building these loops and flows based on behavior, or where you think you want the product, the consumer to go? Are you building cross-channel journeys to make sure that you can pull people in at every stage of the funnel and drive the tornado as it's starting to come through. As a final thought before I open out, first of all, we've got the tools to create not just customers, but enthusiastic fans who believe in what we do. And I think that's fundamentally, kind of from my perspective, the point. It's not about the, negative connotations of addictive. It's how do we create people who are enthusiastic and love what we do and communicate to them in the right way. I think I've probably got a couple of minutes. Any questions? Ooh, no questions. Well, while people are thinking, as a massive thank you, and because I'm always going to be a salesperson and plug, if you scan this QR code, it will give you a 25% off on our website. There we are, but it's up there anyway. So if you've taken a picture of it, feel free to go forward and start to experience. Any questions? Yes.
Can you go back to the slide, the one where you were showing your website flow?
Oh, no. This one.
Yeah, the bit just before that one.
This one.
Yeah, just have the breakdown. I'll be looking at that.
Okay. Cool. Thank you very much, everybody.